What is up, QuadPod listeners? Welcome to our annual show where we pick some draft picks that are inevitably going to be wrong. But we might get one or two right. And so if you want to listen, if you've been listening for the past 3 years, 4 years,
4 years,
congrats. You have, as always, myself, Jeffrey, coming in with some hot picks. We also have Trey.
Hello.
We have Josh.
I will get no picks correct.
And Trevor.
What's up, guys?
So this year we're gonna do something a little fun off the top. We're gonna talk about some hot takes we have about this draft. Josh, do you want to hit us with yours first?
Yeah. I think this draft class is going to have a major quarterback bust. Whether it is Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, somebody that's highly rated coming out of college, I think is going to be a major bust. I just don't think you can put that much hype on this many different guys and expect all of them to perform to a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, level. Inevitably one of them is going to be a major flop for whoever takes them.
Yeah, I feel that this quarterback class is definitely different. I don't think it's as bad. It's definitely not as bad as last year's. My hot take is about the running backs. I really think this running back class is very special. They deserve to be drafted, some in the first round, as you'll see. We do in a little bit. Bijan Robinson is a generational type of talent. He's a guy you're going to see in the league for a while. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is Jahmyr. Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that's going to make a lot of fantasy teams happy. And watch out for some late round steals in A-Chain, Charbonnet, and Tank Bigsby.
Trevor, what about you?
Mine's kind of following what you guys were saying. I really do like Bryce. I think he's gonna be in like the number one tier of quarterbacks this year, followed by Stroud, and then I think it's everybody else after that. But I said that the offensive rookie of the year is not going to be a quarterback, which isn't really a hot take. But I'm saying it's going to be a wide receiver. I think you're going to have somebody like Zay Flowers come in or somebody along the lines of that and just like absolutely dominate.
Yeah.
I also agree with all of our picks. I think only one or two of these quarterbacks are going to even be starting in the league in 4 years' time. A lot of these teams are looking for franchise quarterbacks, and there's some good guys that can get them through, do better than what they have right now. But I don't know if it's worth wasting a top 10 pick, a top 5 pick at that, when there's some like generational athletes that we're going to get onto later. With that, first pick.
The Panthers have been on the clock, and they have been on the clock since they traded with the Chicago Bears. They traded DJ Moore and their first round pick, as well as many other picks, to move up to number 1 to get their guy. And I have them going Bryce Young. I was going to go CJ Stroud, but then I kind of noticed that a lot of the odds are favoring more Bryce Young. Bryce Young is 5'10", 204 pounds. That's according to his measurables at the combine. In 2022, he passed for 3,328 yards, 32 touchdowns, and only threw 5 interceptions. During his Heisman campaign, he threw for almost 5,000 yards, almost 50 touchdowns, and only threw 7 interceptions the whole year. The Panthers have added new weapons in Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, DJ Chark, and Hayden Hurst. So it's a whole new offense under Frank Reich. You got Frank Reich, who is a quarterback whisperer you've seen in other places. He's gotten guys like Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, Phillip Rivers, Peyton Manning under his belt. So I really think he could do something well with Bryce Young. There is the size concern everyone has, but I think my NFL comparison to Bryce Young is Russell Wilson and Drew Brees, and those guys are kind of undersized. But you see, if you surround Bryce Young with ridiculous talent, he's going to show up and show out every single week.
Even if you don't give him ridiculous talent, he is still very good.
I think we saw that this past year at Alabama. He wasn't surrounded by like the best core that he's been surrounded by at his time in Tuscaloosa, but he's still like put up Heisman numbers despite that. With the second pick are the Texans. Now this might change. It probably will change, knowing our luck. But the Texans this year actually have the highest draft stock. They have 12 total picks. Stick with me because this is a lot. 2 first round, 1 second round, 2 third rounds, 1 fourth round, 1 fifth round, 3 sixth rounds, and 2 seventh round picks. This is going to address some immediate gaps that are obviously in the Houston roster before free agency. With that being said, the Houston Texans at number 2 are going to select CJ Stroud, the quarterback from Ohio State. He's bigger than Bryce Young by a good bit. He's 6'3", 218. He was only a starter for 2 years at Ohio State. So he's a redshirt sophomore coming out of college. He's just going to skip over his final 3 years of eligibility because he feels like this is the year that he can get a good shot going to a good team that will, or not a good team since they're first 2 picks, but over his 2 years as a starter at Ohio State, he averaged 9.8 yards, 69.3% completion rate. His stats are a little better than Bryce Young, but that's just because this past 2 years he was surrounded by a little bit better wide receiving talent. And he's a pocket presence, which I think the Texans will be fine with. He only rushed a total of 80 times in college, only getting 136 yards last year, not this past year, but the year before. He actually got negative 20 yards, which is because he was sacked and just didn't rush. And so I think looking at who the Texans had in Davis Mills this past year, he was the 5th lowest passer in the league, behind or right in front of the Jets' 3 quarterbacks that they just rotated around, and Kenny Pickett. So they really need a new franchise quarterback. I think personally Stroud will be one of the quarterbacks that is still there in 4 years. I think if they give him the right weapons, which they don't have many, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later, they really need wide receiver depth. They really need tight end depth that can give him options because, like we said, he's not a Bryce Young that can do it himself. He needs those people he can rely on. The only holdup with this one, if they draft away second, is I don't know if the Texans front office is going to want to work with his agent, David Mulugheta, who is Deshaun Watson's agent. And through all that they've just dealt with over the past year, 2 years, I don't know if they're going to want to lean that way.
Yeah, that agent thing I think is a bigger deal than a lot of people will make out to be, because I mean you saw how bad of an exit that was after Watson left, and so I mean it could truly change the course of the draft, because I really think this is 1 and 2. You can flip whoever you prefer, but if the Texans do not want Stroud, they may trade down and try to get Richardson or somebody like that.
Do you think with them getting D'Amico as the head coach, do you think that kind of influences maybe not getting a quarterback if they can't get Bryce?
Yes. I think if I were the Texans, I'd draft a guy like Will Anderson or a guy like Jalen Carter and get your cornerstone for the defense, and then go get weapons for Mills or whatever stopgap quarterback, and wait until next year until the guys are a little bit better than this year.
Do you think they can afford that?
That's a good question. I mean, first-year head coaches usually do not get fired, but then there's Urban Meyer.
Yeah.
That's a different story, though.
That's a different story. Yeah, that's
sitting on his lap.
Yeah.
So speaking of Will Anderson, with a 3rd pick, I have him going to the Cardinals at number 3. I personally think that he's going to end up at the 2nd pick, but I think you got to go best available. Let's say if they don't trade and Cardinals are just sitting there at 3 and they don't trade back or anything, I think Will Anderson is the absolute best pick in this draft. I think you see that even in college. I mean, really, in Bryce's Heisman season, Will Anderson deserved the Heisman that year. And you don't see that really ever with a defensive player. But I think Cardinals go best available right there and get a big guy like Will Anderson that can be a cornerstone of the defense for years and years to come.
Yeah, that pass rush needs some help, especially, I mean, JJ Watt was not his prime self, but with him retiring, you need to really build off of Will Anderson.
Do you not think that he had kind of a down year this year compared to 2 seasons ago? Just when he was putting up like ridiculous numbers. Do you not think that's going to affect his draft stock?
I don't think it is because I mean, personally, if you look at the numbers, they're pretty comparable. I mean, like they're pretty close. I mean, he had 14 sacks this year. He only had 15 sacks in 2021. He had 42 hurries this year compared to 56 in 21, which is absolutely nuts. I mean, the way they ran the defense with him, they dropped him back in coverage. This dude wasn't even rushing. Like they just makes me sad that he was just underutilized this season. But I mean, he is an absolute talent. He's incredible. But I don't think this season's really gonna affect him because even with a down year, he put up just absolutely insane numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, too, with the way that they did Anderson this year, and then I'll give my pick. Even when Anderson was on the line rushing, he was sometimes double and triple teamed, and he would still find a way into the backfield to, either disrupt the throw or he would, snag the running back and throw him down for a loss. And so, I mean, you can put him anywhere on the field and he's going to make an impact. Just please don't be Pete Golding and act like Will Anderson is extra defensive back that you can use to try and cover a wide receiver. Like that's just dumb.
Absolutely.
Okay. For the Colts are like every other bad team in the league right now. They need somebody to like take over and like lead for them. And I mean, they tried that this past year with Matt Ryan. They said, let's go get a dude that's been in the NFL since the NFL's been on TV and see if we can make him do something. And that didn't go well. He started, I think, 12 games for them. And then they ended up having to put in Sam Ellinger and Nick Foles. And then they cut Matt Ryan. So now they're left with this big question of what are we going to do with the quarterback position? And I think for the style of offense that the Colts want to play, the guy that fits best for them is Anthony Richardson from Florida. Richardson's 6'4", 232. He's one of the biggest quarterbacks in the draft. Really good at running. He's a decent passer. He was 176 of 327 passes this year. So he was right about a 54% rate. He threw for a little over 2,500 yards. Only 17 touchdowns and 9 picks. That's not the greatest ratio, but it's not the Jameis Winston 30 for 30 either. So, it's a little bit better than that. I just think, Richardson's one of those guys that could sneak into the top 2 if the Texans don't want CJ Stroud and they still want a quarterback. I mean, Richardson's not a bad guy to take at 2. I just don't think they will. But I mean, we saw Richardson at Florida. You give him some good coaching and you put some people around him and he can make plays happen. He's also really good at, scrambling. Like scrambling's his bread and butter. Like he can get out of anything almost. He can move very well and he can still sling it down the field if need be. And so I just think for the Colts, Richardson makes the most sense in this draft class for number 4.
Yeah, Richardson's an interesting prospect because I really think his success is going to be determined on what scheme he gets in. I mean, my comp for him is like a hybrid of Jalen Hurts and Cam Newton. I mean, he's got the size of Cam Newton and then just the shiftiness of Jalen Hurts from this last year. And the reason I bring up Hurts the most is because you have the Eagles offensive coordinator from this last year as the new Colts head coach. And so if he's going to succeed, it's going to be in this system. And so I think he could be a really fun player. And I mean, Sunbelt Billy didn't do well with him in Florida, but who knows what he can do in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I will say I think Richardson is a boomer bust prospect. I think if he gets in the right situation, he's going to be a star. But I think he has a potential to just kind of fade away maybe. But I mean, I think he's got the raw athletic ability that I think somebody's gonna gamble on him. I don't know who it is, but he's gonna he the combine alone, he's played himself into at least a top 15 pick.
All right. Number 5, the Seattle Seahawks will be selecting Peter Skoronski from Northwestern. Offensive line is one of Seattle's biggest needs. In the second year of Russell Wilson less Seattle, this pick is actually Denver's pick. And Denver was so bad this year that they gave Seattle a top 5 pick. So you've got Geno Smith, who came off a career year last year, and you need to surround him with guys. You can bookend your offensive line with Charles Cross from last year, the offensive tackle out of Mississippi State, and now Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern. He started at Northwestern basically every game since his freshman year. He can scoot into guard if they need it. He came into Northwestern as a center, so he literally probably could play any position on the offensive line if needed. Seattle was tied for 9th most sacks allowed last season, so they definitely need more help along the line. The only concerns I've seen with Skoronski are his arm length, which is so weird. But I actually noticed that they said something similar about a guy that came out of Northwestern a few years ago, Rashawn Slater, and he's been a absolute monster with the Chargers. So Skoronski, I think, is probably the best offensive lineman in the class, and I think he'll jump off the board quick.
Yeah, I like that pick. See, the Seahawks, it's almost kind of like Green Bay with getting skill positions. They just cannot build their offensive line. And I think that was one reason that Wilson had left. But hopefully, I like Geno. I think he's done a really good job. So I think if they're thinking about kind of moving forward with him, they really need to protect him a lot. But I like that pick.
Yeah, with the 6th pick is Detroit. In Detroit, they offensively, they were surprising last season. They were actually pretty decent. Where they lacked severely was on the defensive side of the ball. They were 32 or 32nd in most pass stats and 30th in rush defense, which is just horrible. How you have almost the all collective worst defense in the league, I think, is an accomplishment in and of itself. But I have them going with Jalen Carter out of Georgia with the 6th pick. He's a big boy. He even if he's not making plays, he causes an issue that I think needs to be addressed, similar to Derek Brown when he was at Auburn. And the Lions love their interior defensive linemen. They always love to get a big boy every couple of years. My only problem with this pick is some off the field incidents that's happened in the offseason. Obviously, like, he was involved in some street racing incidents where 2 people died, and Detroit's really big, and they've tried to build their team around people with high football character, people that that understand what it means to be a good person on the field and off the field. And they, despite what happened, they still brought him in. They still worked with him one-on-one on their top 30 visits. And they liked him. They were impressed with what they saw. And the only thing is, I'm just not sure if they're going to want to pull the trigger on somebody that might cause issues outside of the football field.
Yeah, without the character concerns, I mean, Carter's probably going to be a little higher up than at 6, probably.
Yeah, I can totally see him slipping higher, especially if like Will Anderson goes at 2nd. I can see the Cardinals picking him up. I know it's not the same position, but still massive help on the D line.
So next pick is the Raiders with the 7th pick. I think they could possibly trade up, but if they don't get the opportunity, I have them picking Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State. Paris Johnson Jr. is a really good offensive tackle. If the Raiders aren't looking to move up and get a quarterback, I think they build up their offensive line kind of similar to how the Seahawks are doing. kind of just protecting what they've got. And if they tank this year, maybe get a quarterback next year if they want that. But Paris Johnson Jr., I think he really started playing his best football like towards the end of the season last season. I think he really made himself some money in the Georgia game, especially in the playoff game. Just going up against that vicious Georgia defensive line. We already talked about Carter, and there's some more absolute studs from that team. But I know they're teammates, but I mean the way Stroud talks about them, I mean they seem like they're hand in hand in terms of how Stroud succeeded in football. I think he has a major part to play in that.
Yeah, Paris Johnson has been discussed in that top echelon of offensive linemen. So, I mean, if you're going to commit to Jimmy G for the next couple years, you really need to protect him. I mean, you look at San Francisco, I mean, the best tackle in the league, Trent Williams, was there. I mean, that was a big part of their run for the Super Bowl a few years ago, and still why they're very successful. So that's a good pick.
Okay. The Falcons. How depressing. It's just Falcons have just been such a letdown ever since Tom Brady just broke their spirit in what was that, 2016, 2017, whatever that was.
Go. We're so
I
old.
know. God, so long ago. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, the Falcons are in such just a weird place of where, like, they're going to use Ritter as quarterback this year. Is that right? Desmond Ritter, is that who they're going to use that they've announced is going to be the starter? So, what do you do if you're the Falcons? I mean, okay, so if Desmond Ritter's your guy, you've got some offensive weapons there to help as long as people can stay healthy. I think for the Falcons, their best bet is to try and build up the defensive side of the ball. And I think their best pick is Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, that stud edge that Iowa had this year. He wasn't really talked about a whole lot throughout the year, but he's his size wise, he would fit and fill a lot of holes that the Falcons need. He's 6'5", 269. He had 18 solo tackles this year, 6.5 sacks. I mean, like I said, the Falcons are in just such a weird place that, starting on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, they're trying to basically have to do like a whole rebuild. And it seems like in the NFL, if you're going to rebuild, you start on the defensive side of the ball for whatever reason. And I think Van Ness would be a good addition to that defense.
Yeah, that's a good pick. He's definitely, I think, a project player. But I think he'll come into his own and be one of those guys you look back on, and some of these teams are like, dang it, I wish I would have got that guy.
Yeah. Because I mean, he had glimpses this year when you got to watch him, if you watched Iowa play, where there were times where he would, shine here or shine there, and so he's got the makings to be good. It just depends. So.
Yeah, I think Falcons, I mean, like you said, they've been really disappointing like ever since that Super Bowl, but I mean, they've got some pieces there. I mean, they just need some more bones to add to the structure. They need like that beef up the offensive line, beef up the defensive line. I mean, you got like some skill positions like some skill guys like Kyle Pitts there. I mean, like you've got something to work with, but it's just like they can't get their crap together. But I think a pick like that, like, yeah, beefing up the defensive line is a good decision.
Yeah. We're having a run on edge rushers here because at number 9, the Bears traded back from number 1, and they get a guy that honestly you could have looked at in the top tier of edge rushers. A lot of people have talked about this guy, Tyree Wilson, edge out of Texas Tech. He's a big dude. He's 6'6", 271. He's a long edge rusher. The Bears are still looking to replace Khalil Mack's production from a few years ago. They traded him away, and that really set them back. And I think the Bears really would have liked to tackle here, but I don't think they would be willing to pick a guy like Broderick Jones yet. The top 2 guys are off the board, so they went with another need, and that's edge. They had the least amount of sacks in the league last year with 20. They were 32 of 32 there. Tyree Wilson had 36 solo tackles, 7 sacks, and 1 forced fumble during the 2022 season. His frame is going to help him. And I think, like Josh said, when you're rebuilding the team, you really want to get your edge rushers. You want to get your offensive line. You want to get your quarterback. That's really the top 3 positions in the league currently if you're wanting to rebuild. And, I mean, the Bears are, with this pick 2/3 of the way there with Justin Fields and now Tyree Wilson. So, yeah.
Yeah, I honestly had not even heard of this guy until this week, actually. I was watching, it was a video, they were talking to Will Anderson in an interview about him being like the safest pick in the draft when there's guys like Tyree Wilson available. And I mean, his film looks really good. I mean, like he's got the body type. I mean, he almost looks like Will Anderson. So I think, yeah, right here, you're kind of going best available maybe. But I think he has a chance to be a really high volume guy that could come in and like make an impact right away.
At number 10 in this year's draft, we have the Eagles. My opinion, Eagles should have won the Super Bowl. I think
That's facts. That's facts. That's facts. That's facts.
the deepest team overall in the league. I think they're the deepest team we've seen in a while, where they've retained a lot of their star guys. They lost some guys that we'll talk about later on, but having a top 10 pick after almost winning the Super Bowl to the Chiefs, who should have won the year before, I think they're gonna just run it back this year, personally. But I have been taking Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia, outside linebacker. He's 6'3", 235. Over 4 years at Georgia, he put up 113 tackles, 66 solo, 11 and a half sacks. They rarely rush with a pure linebacker, so I think, and they have a stacked edge core, but I think he's just a ridiculous athlete, and he can replace Brendan Graham, who's 34, who played 43% of their defensive snaps. This guy's taking an old guy's spot with a younger, more youthful talent who has the size, who obviously can do it in the biggest games. We see him winning 2 national championships with Georgia over the past 2 years. And it would also mean that we get a little reunion up in Philadelphia with Nakobe Dean. Both of them were really important to Georgia winning the national championship against Alabama 2 years ago. And I think they could run the league on that side of the ball. They already know how to work well together. If they know how to work off of each other, how to cover each other's deficiencies. So I just think Nolan Smith going to Philly, that would just bolster that defense even more.
You forget Jordan Davis is there too.
I was about to say,
True, yeah.
Eagles are about to start becoming the Georgia factory. You look at the Eagles, and they've got a guy like Hassan Reddick, and he's that hybrid, like outside linebacker edge type guy, and that's Nolan Smith. And so you basically get, because the Saints were stupid and traded them their first round pick this year, you basically get a very good backup for an older type guy. And so I'm a little concerned with Nolan Smith. He was hurt a lot last year, but I think you have him coming off the bench is basically like your 6th man. It would be kind of crazy. I will say this is a sneaky Bijan Robinson spot.
Yeah.
It's
a good point. That's a good point.
If Philly really doesn't need anything else, you take best player available, and I'm a proponent that believes that Bijan Robinson is one of the top 5 players in this draft. So, you really can do whatever. They can do whatever they want here. But I think, and we'll see this here, if Bijan slips past here, he's going to start falling. Because a lot of people don't respect the running back. So that's just my sense there.
They have, my only thing with that is they have a pretty deep running back depth chart. They have a Rashad Penny, Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott. And Boston Scott was ridiculous last year, and he's their 3rd string. So I don't know if filling in with another first round paying that big contract for a top 10 pick, you know. I don't know if they'll want to do that necessarily. I think it would Bijan next to Jalen Hurts. I would be afraid.
I don't see how I don't see how you beat that team.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't see how you beat that team, not with also having Devontae Smith and Brown on opposite sides. I mean, how do you defend that? I mean, Hurts can move the ball and hurt you. He can hand it off to Bijan Robinson and he can destroy you. And if that doesn't work, Hurts can just fling the ball down the field and one of those guys is going to catch it.
True.
And then defensively, they're already stacked. I just don't know how you beat that team.
Yeah, and especially I think from the Super Bowl. I mean, I think they'll probably will go defense just because of how many yards both teams combined for in that game. I mean, I think they're kind of embarrassed about that, saying, "Hey, we're going to stack our line. You're not going to move the ball against us." But yeah, I bad feelings about. I don't want to watch another Super Bowl after that. That was scarring. Feel bad for Eagles fans for that one. So with pick 11, the Titans are on the board. I have them going with Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's really fascinating to me. He barely played last year, but if you go back and look at his stats from 2021, he had 95 recorded targets, and he went for like 1,600 like receiving yards. The dude was absolutely nuts last year. So
last year was that big game he had in the Rose Bowl, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. He had like 5 or 6 touchdown catches.
Yep. I mean, he was untouchable. So I think getting a big time wide receiver like him, I think he could come in and have an impact, kind of like you've seen the other Ohio State receivers have last year. I think he can be that exact same mold. And as like big Bama fan, but I mean, Ohio State really is becoming wide receiver U. I mean, I still think Bama is a little bit, but I mean, Ohio State might be tied right there, the way they've been pumping him out here. And I mean, this dude is absolutely crazy. But I think if you get somebody like him, if somebody like Traylon Burks can pan out, like I thought he was going to be an absolute steal last year, and he was hurt this year, but had some flashes here and there. But I mean, at Arkansas, he was a monster. So I think if you get him kind of going, you pair him with Njigba from Ohio State, and they're eventually going to have a quarterback, though. Somebody's got to give him the ball. But I think Tannehill can kind of still be a bridge if they decide to go for somebody else. But I think if you give him some more weapons, I think Njigba would be a great fit right there in Tennessee.
All right. Texans are back at 12th. I have them taking Quentin Johnston from TCU, the wide receiver that, really kind of helped them destroy Michigan. In what was that? Was that the Peach Bowl they were in? Was that the one? Was it Fiesta? Sorry. But then he got absolutely shut down in the national championship game because, Georgia just smothered them. But I mean, it's like what we said with the Texans. Jeffrey rattled off that seems like they have every single pick in this year's draft. And so I think, using your 12th pick to take a wide receiver after either, they may take a quarterback, or even if they don't, just adding a guy that's a really good wide receiver to your team is never a bad thing. This season, he had 60 catches for a little over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. But alone in the Michigan game, he had 6 catches for 162 yards and 1 touchdown. And he was averaging almost 30 yards a catch in that game. And so, I think he's kind of one of the dark horses of this wide receiver class. He wasn't really talked about much until, his breakout game, which was Michigan. And then he kind of jumped onto everybody's draft board. But I think for the Texans, wide receiver is probably the next best place to go after you solve either the quarterback or the defensive issue.
So the Jets are up next at pick 13, and they are drafting for Aaron Rodgers here. I'm expecting that trade to go through any day now. Probably draft night. We are going to lay to rest Jeffrey's hopes and dreams with the Packers. Poor buddy. But I have them going Broderick Jones here. If you draft Broderick Jones and then start Mekhi Becton on the other side, that's an absolutely nasty tackle duo. I mean, you've got a guy in Broderick Jones that's 6'5", 311 pounds. That's a freaking mountain of a man. And then Mekhi Becton's who's like 6'7", probably 350. And it's just like, what edge rushers are going to get past that? And so you're setting up Rodgers for success already. My only concern about Broderick is he only started last year. He was on the bench, and that's because Georgia just has started becoming this talent factory of 5 stars. And you see guys like Broderick Jones sit for longer. You saw it the last decade plus with Alabama guys. And so I think Jones really is a raw talent ready to explode to the next level. And I think he will be a big reason why the Jets take another step this year.
I don't like thinking about Aaron Jones in a Jets uniform. That's gonna look so wrong.
Trevor, are you gonna make another prediction like you did the first time we did this with Gronk? Aaron Jones or Aaron Rodgers?
Oh gosh.
The Jets would take Aaron Jones too.
They absolutely would.
Devontae would come to the Jets and we just have a little Packer reunion. Make me cry. Okay, so at number 14, I have the Patriots. And I have them going with Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois, the cornerback from Illinois. He's pretty decent size, 6'1", 180. He's really good at getting to the ball. Just looking at his stats, over 4 years, he has 160 tackles, 117 of those being solo. He only had 5 picks, but I don't think it's too much to worry about. But he would bring a pretty solid depth to New England, who have the hardest schedule this next year. And you see that they lost, I know this is a safety position, but they lost Devin McCourty, who's been there the past 13 seasons. So they're going to lose a leader in McCourty leaving, but they're going to bring in one of the best cornerbacks in this year's class in Witherspoon.
My only question is, what about with Outerspin?
I haven't thought about that one.
Gotta have a little comedy here and there.
Is that what that was?
All right, Jeffrey, this one's for you, buddy. So pick 15, we got the Packers coming up. So
They're gonna take a quarterback randomly.
they're not going to take a quarterback, I don't think, which, I mean, I guess they can go Levis here, but so I was kind of torn with this decision because I saw Jeffrey later on picked Mayer out of Notre Dame, and I was like, oh, I think he's might be the number 1 tight end prospect in this draft. So I was kind of questioning my pick here, but I ended up picking Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. I think Kincaid's a really interesting pick right here, just because he's a glorified receiver. I mean, he'd be a huge receiver. I mean, he's 6'3", 246 pounds. I mean, he's a big dude, but he's got really soft hands. I mean, think of kind of like a Gronk or even like a Travis Kelce kind of guy. I think you don't need necessarily a blocking tight end. If you're Green Bay, you kind of need somebody that can come in and act as another receiver, kind of spread the field out a little bit more. But last year at Utah, and they had 2 really good tight ends this year, but even with having another guy in the rotation, he had 890 receiving yards. I mean, he put up some pretty decent numbers. He wasn't necessarily always consistent with it, but I mean, I think if he's in the right system, he can really flourish.
You think that Jordan Love's going to be able to get him the ball?
It's a good question. Yeah, I guess it's a wait and see. But I mean, I guess if they tank, kind of like with some of the other teams, you can get a quarterback next year. I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting you to be really good, especially with losing Aaron Rodgers. That's just,
Yeah.
I know for Packers fans, I know that's just going to be a weird thing next year to turn on your TV and see him playing New York. But I think if Love doesn't work out, I think they may be looking at another quarterback next year. But I think even at this pick, you'll have a few targets there if they do get a quarterback next year. You won't kind of be like the Texans where you don't have necessarily a lot going on in that regard, but I think that'd be a good pick for them.
The Washington Football Commanders just got sold to some new group. Is next at 16, and I've got them taking Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon. Commanders, they're middle of the pack team right now. They didn't do, they're trying, woohoo for them. But I mean, defensively, I mean, they could win so many more games if they could shut down mid-level passing teams. Because I mean, that's what their division is. I mean, you play in Dallas and whoever else they have to play every year. Shut down some of these mid-level across the field passing gaps, and you're going to do a whole lot better. But with a quarterback like Gonzalez to the Commanders, I think it makes them look, and it helps them in the secondary a lot better. Because if you look at his stats this year, 35 solo tackles, 4 picks. He was kind of pretty good dude in for Oregon in their secondary. He's 6'2", 201, so he's your perfect, size as a cornerback. He's fast, he's pretty strong. And I just think for the Commanders, you add some more depth to that secondary, and it's really going to help a defensive line that, they've kind of put a lot of money into to keep that defensive line where it's at. And, you invest a little bit in your secondary, and I think it makes Washington better and maybe in more of a contention for a division, a better divisional spot, or maybe even into the playoffs this year. So,
yeah, that division's tough, man. Like you got the Eagles,
yeah,
then you've got the Cowboys, who are very good. And then,
but like I said, if a team like Washington, if they shut down the passing game at Dallas, which is not hard to do, and somebody like, Gonzalez can really help you do that. He's really good at, shutting down pretty good wide receivers. So.
Yeah, I like what you said about the defensive line. I mean, they've got the guys there. That
Yeah,
defense really is surprising. You just expect them to be better with who they've got. But I think you're right. I think that can contribute a lot to the lack of DBs there. So yeah, I think that's a good move. Just kind of strengthening the back end of your defense up, kind of helping out your offense.
well, now at 17, the Steelers are jumping for joy because I think they have 2 options here. They can join teams like the Bengals and the Eagles and partner up some college quarterbacks with some college wide receivers and a guy like Jordan Addison with Kenny Pickett, or they go get one of their franchise guys from the past decade, son, in Joey Porter Jr. And that's who I have them selecting. The Steelers just traded for Allen Robinson from the Rams the other day, and so they're pretty set at receiver. So unfortunately for Pickett, they're going defense, and that steel curtain needs to come back down in Pittsburgh again because it's been a rough go for them ever since Roethlisberger retired, and you've got a lot of guys that have kind of gone downhill since. But Tomlin's still kicking up there. That dude's a beast, a defensive wizard. Honestly, he's one of the best coaches in the league. And you got to
not had a losing season.
With some of the quarterbacks, and like you got like guys like Mason Rudolph, and God bless his soul. So Joey Porter Jr. His dad played with the team from 99 to 2006. He won Super Bowl 40 with the team. And you got a guy like Joey Porter who's a very big corner and is he's gonna be your cornerback one in your defense. And so the guy 6'2", 193. He didn't run, I mean, a 4.46 is no slouch, but it's not when you're a corner. It's not the best. He didn't get a lot of picks in college. He only had 1 pick his entire career at Penn State. But he's a really physical corner. My comp for him is Marlon Humphrey, and he's gonna beat you to death at the line of scrimmage. And so he's gonna learn a lot from their new free agent acquisition, Patrick Peterson. And I think this is a a slam dunk. This could be your defensive rookie of the year next year.
With the 18th pick, we have the Detroit Lions. Here, I think looking at, to me, one of the most shocking bits of business, trading away Hawkinson in the middle of the season, when he was like one of their like standout, like Jared Goff's not a good quarterback. I don't think he'll be there after this season. Take that as you will, but Hawkinson was one of his main targets, especially with Jameson Williams being hurt and not being used to the league yet. He couldn't really rely on him. So St. Brown was really like their only receiver after Hawkinson left. And so I think selecting Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, the tight end, he's a great natural replacement for him. He's really good, really soft hands, really good at catching in tight spaces, getting those 4-yard receptions, 7-yard receptions that are really crucial in games. I think he'll also be really good on the line of scrimmage, helping with run blocking, helping make the offensive line feel a little bit more secure. And I think this right here is a big steal for them. I think next year they're going to be looking for a new quarterback to give Mayer a little bit better yardage. I don't know, better quarterback in general. I think will help the Lions because you have such a good receiving core. St. Brown's ridiculous. Jameson Williams, when he finally, I think this year he's going to just turn on, and he's just going to be ridiculous. And then if you add Mayer in that group, that's a good solid 3 receiving core to have up in Detroit.
Yeah, Goff's no slouch. I think he surprised a lot of people last year. And Detroit is my sneaky like dark horse team next year in the NFC.
Yeah, Jeff, I like that pick, Jeffrey. I'd like the replacement for TJ, and Goff, honestly, I think is just in a very good situation, like you were saying, because of just the receivers they've gotten. I mean, you add a guy like Michael Mayer into that. I mean, Jamal Williams was tearing it up last year. I mean, I like the sneaky pick for them though with Detroit. I think if Goff can just be decent, if he can be decent and not turn the ball over, if he can just be decent though, I think Detroit's gonna be really, really good. All right, now that we're over the kneecaps, pick 19. I got the Bucks going with. I know you've been waiting for him, Mister. Put your mayonnaise in your coffee and drink it. Levis.
That alone should disqualify him from playing in the league.
Yeah, that alone put Stetson Bennett over Will Levis on the chart, even with the DU or the public intoxication. Maybe on the same level. I don't know. Will Levis, I don't really understand the hype. I've watched him play a lot, and he just doesn't look that great to me. And I just came up with this comp just when I was looking at the PFF for him. Just his size, he's 6'4", 229 pounds. I mean, that's your stereotypical. That's what you want your quarterback to be in the NFL. You want a big dude, big arm. But when I think about Will Levis, all I can think about is Christian Hackenberg. You know, Christian Hackenberg, I mean, when I was younger, I thought Christian Hackenberg was going to be like the return of Tom Brady. You know, like he just looks the part. And that Will Levis looks the part. He looks like a quarterback. But I don't know. He had a pretty mediocre season. I mean, like Kentucky's got a decent team. I mean, his numbers are comparable to last year. So I mean, he threw for 2,800 yards last year. He threw for 2,400 this year. He had a touchdown to INT ratio of 19 touchdowns to 10 picks. I mean, it's not great. The year before it was 24-13. So I mean, he's pretty average. I mean, for a Kentucky team that's got a solid defense, he doesn't have to try too hard. I think a lot of this is the body type, the stature for him. But I think with the Bucks right here, you might want to just kind of got a late first round pick, you might want to take a gamble and get you another quarterback if you don't think who's the quarterback from Florida? What's his name that's there now?
Baker's there, but
Oh,
Trask.
Baker is there. You're right.
I'm Baker.
Yeah, Trask.
But I think you could get like a guy like him. Maybe you think you can develop him. I mean, I think he could be good. He's got the stature for it, but I hadn't seen enough from him at Kentucky to think that he can really succeed. But I think somebody's going to take a gamble with him here in like a late first round pick.
I can see him floating around the league, kind of like Jarrett Stidham, and just being like a guy who's going to be consistent, but he's going to be a backup. Like he's not going to be good enough to be a franchise quarterback. He's not going to be good enough to rip up any trees. But I think if your starter gets hurt and you need somebody that can throw the ball 60%, I think he's your guy for that.
All right. Number 20, Seattle Seahawks. I've got them taking Brian Branch, the safety out of Alabama. Branch was kind of a big defensive leader for Alabama. As a big Bama fan, there were times where I was screaming, please take him off the field. To be honest with that. But I mean, he was, he had this year, his stats this year were pretty good for a safety. He had 90 total tackles, 58 solo, 3 sacks, and 2 picks. So I think, for any team that's looking to kind of rebuild and kind of get back into the limelight of their division, like Seattle's trying to do, even though they're Russell Wilsonless now. I think Branch is a good pick to add to your defense. I mean, he gives you some leadership in the back end of it, and he's pretty big for he's 6 foot. He's 6 foot even, 193. So he's fast. He's a strong guy, and so I think for Seattle, it makes a lot of sense for them to take Brian Branch.
Yeah, he made himself some money in that Kansas State game this year. I think he had a rough start to the year, but I think towards the end of the season, I think people really took notice of him. I think he really turned things around, and I think he would be a really good pick here in the late first.
Okay, next up you have the Chargers. The Chargers were one of those teams last year that everyone loved preseason. I mean, you got Justin Herbert, who's a up-and-coming guy in the league, and you've got guys around him like Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, who now is wanting out of Los Angeles. And then you got on the defensive side, I mean, you've got Derwin James, you've got Joey Bosa, you've got Khalil Mack. I mean, you're set up in places you need to be set up. But they just kind of underperformed last year. I mean, the Chiefs ran that division, and so it was tough. So I'm going to get Herbert another weapon in Jordan Addison. He was the Biletnikoff Award winner in 2021 at Pittsburgh. He had almost 60. He was 7 yards away from having 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. With Caleb Williams this last season, he had 875 yards and 7 touchdowns on an injury-ridden season. He had a rough combine for his size. He ran a 4.49, and yet again, I say rough combine 4.49. Like I could run a 4.49. I could not run a 4.49. But he was injured a lot this past year, and that's going to hurt his stock. I think you look at a guy like Jordan Addison a year ago before he transferred to USC, and you were thinking like, hey, he's the top stuff, and he really lost a lot of stock this year with not being available. So I think he's a good fit in there, though. Like he's a good slot option for Herbert and complements well to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So this is just another arms race pick for the Chargers to stay up there with the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's a good pick.
Yeah, I think after last year, especially with how their offense performed, I think kind of adding a little juice with the new fresh wide receiver is a really good pick right there.
They just got to get the coaching right. That's the Chargers' only thing.
Yeah.
It's like Justin Herbert I think, can be that guy for them. If they surround him with the right people, not only on the field, but on the sidelines, I think Chiefs have a run for their money. At the 22nd pick, we have I have Zay Flowers from Boston College, the wide receiver out of BC going. Obviously, they lost Hollywood Brown to the Cardinals recently. This past season. They picked up Odell, but I don't think Zay Flowers is necessarily quite a Hollywood Brown replacement. Brown has been one of the most consistent wide receivers for Lamar over the past couple of seasons, but Flowers is more of a slot option. I think if he lines up in the slot, he can help carry the load, especially if Odell doesn't pan out, kind of like he didn't in Cleveland. Like if you need a guy who's going to get you good short yards, let Lamar do the rest, find his other targets. I think Zay Flowers, he's one of the best receivers out there in this draft. I think he would really do good in Maryland if Lamar stays.
That's a big if.
If Lamar leaves, I could see them just doing something else and just say, hey, we're going to tank for a good quarterback next year. But
I mean, Hendon Hooker is still on the board.
he is,
I'm bored.
but
We got some Hendon Hooker haters out here.
I think
Anything about Tennessee, I hate, especially that stupid song.
Hey,
Hey,
speaking
it's catchy though. It gets stuck in your head.
That's facts.
speaking of Tennessee, I think we got some polls coming up here.
Yeah, we do.
Alrighty. This man, oh my gosh.
Why did you pick him, Trevor?
I think he's a good player. I really do, but he really ruined my he really ruined one of my days in October, man.
Really ruined my year.
He really did ruin my year. That loss has lingered, and I really hate Tennessee. Everything about Tennessee, the puke orange. I hate Tennessee.
They low down, they dirty.
It's some stitches, bro. But I've got the Vikings going with Jalen Hyatt. I mean, his big money game was against Bama. I mean, which I think maybe
Every Tennessee player's big money game was against Bama.
that's very fair. Bama and Clemson, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that could have been attributed to Bama's play calling that game, but either way, Jalen Hyatt is an absolute burner. He's so fast, and I think if you pair a guy like him with Justin Jefferson, give Cousins another guy to throw to, I think you open the offense up even more. Kind of takes some of that stress off of Jefferson right there, so he's not double teamed. I really like Hyatt to the Vikings or somewhere. I think there's really a lot of good receivers in this draft. I think there's a lot of underrated receivers. I liked the Flowers picks to the Ravens. I think he's a really fast guy. But I think really any of these guys right here, I mean, you could honestly interchange them. I think they're all really talented, but I like Hyatt right here.
I think it's a very good pick. I think like you said, he'd do very well in Minnesota, and I think it would actually give the Vikings a chance to be relevant this season. All right, 24 is Jacksonville. I've got them taking Darnell Wright, the offensive lineman from Tennessee. I think that's kind of a no-brainer pick. You know, Lawrence is kind of the guy is the guy in Jacksonville, and you want to protect him. You want to keep him upright. So why not throw in a very good offensive lineman to protect him? And I mean, you saw what Jacksonville did this year with a pretty, halfway put together team. They said, if you give us a coach that doesn't do inappropriate things on the off the field, we'll make the playoffs. And we'll look pretty good while we're doing it. And I think if you add another offensive lineman to give Trevor Lawrence some time to either throw the ball, sprint, outside and grab a couple of yards, I think that it just makes Jacksonville even better. And they continue to kind of climb back into relevance in the league. So I think it's a no-brainer pick for Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Jacksonville and Detroit are the two most up-and-coming teams, in my opinion, in the league.
I agree.
You got two really good coaches behind those forces. Another up and coming team in the league, the New York Giants. They went and re-signed Daniel Jones this year. They're trying to get Saquon back on the bus. Don't know how that's going to work. That may affect who they draft. Yet again, Bijan in the NFC East. But I did not go Bijan here. I went Deontay Banks from Maryland. He's a cornerback. The Giants probably should have traded up and tried to get one of those receivers like Flowers or Hyatt or Addison here. But they're kind of left with their hands empty with Darius Slayton and some other guys that are serviceable, but not like next level guys. So I have them going with their next need corner. Banks is 6 foot, 197. He had 25 solo tackles, an interception, and 8 pass breakups in 2022. He ran a 4.35 at the combine. He's a really quick dude, and he has the length to be an outside corner of the league. And I think you pair him with the Giants' current corner, Adoree Jackson, and you've got a pretty good duo to stop the high-flying NFC East. It's going to take a lot more than that, but I think you have a start.
At 26, we have Dallas. I think it really, if he's here, like Trey said,
I don't think he's here.
I don't think
I
he's
don't think he's
here.
here. I think someone is going to
Yeah.
trade up for Bijan.
I think he's going at 10. I think Philly takes him.
Yeah.
That'd be nasty. But also, if he falls here, this is a perfect Ezekiel Elliott replacement. Like, you can't get more of a natural replacement for what Zeke has been since he was drafted. I think Bijan's the best pure running back we've seen come into the league probably since Zeke. He in his time as college, 589 rushing attempts, 3,410 yards, 33 touchdowns, my bad. And he's good with his hands too. He's a good route runner. He's a really physical back, but he's not like just a big guy that like I think Bo Scarborough back. Like, he was just a really massive dude who could get the job done. But he didn't have the overall athleticism that Bijan has. Bijan is a tough runner, and he won't go down for anything. I'm kind of sad that Texas wasn't in the SEC, so we could see him play like some SEC level defenses. I think like seeing him versus Alabama or Georgia, seeing them against tough, not Auburn, but against tough.
Hey, Jeffrey, he did play Alabama this year.
I just mean consistently.
Okay. I just wanted to remind you that they were beaten by Alabama this year, sadly.
No,
I was there. I was there. I almost had a heat stroke.
A guy named
Terrible.
Auburn almost beat Alabama this year. Wouldn't that have been awesome?
but I just think that like it would have been very good to see like him and Gibbs kind of going at it for the best rusher in the SEC this past season. But I don't think that he'll fall here. And Dallas used their franchise tag on Tony Pollard recently, so I don't think they would just go ahead and draft another running back right after using their franchise tag on a running back.
But it's very Jerry Jones-esque to just go.
It would be.
Look, I mean, they did it. I mean, it's like with CeeDee Lamb. They literally had a Josh. Why are you laughing?
Just Jerry Jones just cracks me up because he's just
Jerry Jones
so
will be
terrible. He's just so terrible at his job. I mean, it's like I just don't. Never mind.
So, yeah, I think. I mean, keep Bijan Texas.
There's 2 players in this draft that just scream Cowboys to me, and it's Drew Sanders from Arkansas, and it's Bijan from Texas.
Yes.
Like, when I could have told me they had like 2 more years in college, I would have just looked at them and be like, they're gonna go to the Cowboys. Like, they scream Cowboys for some reason. But yeah, I'm with y'all. I don't think Bijan falls that far. Honestly, Bijan or Gibbs, they're both really, really talented. Somebody's gonna bite the bullet and take them. I don't know who it's gonna be, but they're very, very talented running backs. So going with that theme, 27, the Bills are picking, and I have them going with Gibbs. Gibbs was kind of underutilized in a way this year. He still almost had 1,000 yards rushing, but I feel like there was still potential left on the table. But he's a very different back compared to a Bijan. Bijan's kind of a bruiser, and Gibbs is more of like a spread you out kind of guy. He can go on punt returns, kick returns. He can catch the ball out of that backfield. I mean, he can do anything you need. He can block. I mean, I think he's a very, very versatile back of the best side, but I think he kind of makes up for it with his speed. He ran a 4.36 at the combine, which is like unnatural. Like he's a very shifty, speedy guy. But I think somebody's going to take Gibbs and Bijan earlier. It's somebody's got to. They're just too talented.
All right. 28 is the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that this is the perfect place for Georgia tight end Darnell Washington to go. I think this really continues to help build, in my mind, one of the best offenses in the NFL with the Bengals. Yes, they're reshuffling the offensive line. Yes, one of their anchor points wants out with Jonah Williams. But I do think that they still have all the weapons regarding some off the field issues. I still think that they've got the ability to, be very good, especially if they add Washington. So just kind of for a reference point, this year, all right, so Washington is 6'7", 270 pounds. He is basically a defensive lineman playing tight end. Like when he's running at you, it's terrifying. 28 catches, 454 yards with 2 touchdowns this year. He was averaging a little over 16 yards a catch. So he's very good at getting behind and into the secondary and making you hurt, especially on long second downs and third downs. And for Joey B and the Bengals, I think adding somebody like Washington just makes you even scarier in the league.
Yes, he's basically a sixth offensive lineman on the field that can catch the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
Adding to my running back point from earlier, the tight end class here is unbelievable. I mean, you've got three guys, and then next year you've got Brock Bowers, and it's like there is an absolute renaissance at the tight end position because of guys like Kelsey and guys like Darren Waller, and I'm probably missing one. Kittle, there he is. There's the other one. Yeah. So the Saints are going to come marching in here for pick 29. The Saints are in a really weird spot. They just went and signed Derek Carr, which was a really weird signing, in my opinion. You invest that much money in a quarterback that's probably going to be there for about 3 years and then head on. And so that you've got all the Kamara stuff that's going on. You've got Michael Thomas still running slants out there. But the NFC South is for the taking. I mean, Brady's done. And so you really need to shape up a defense that's going to be ready to take that. And I have them going Brian Brzee here from Clemson. Brzee's 6'5", 298 pounds. His career stats at Clemson, he has 50 total tackles, 9 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, and an interception. He did have ACL surgery in 2021 and shoulder surgery in 2022. But Brzee does not play like he is 298 pounds. He plays a lot heavier than that, and he gets in your face. I think it's a great compliment to Cameron Jordan, and with the loss of guys like David Onyemata and Marcus Davenport, you really need to shape up that defensive line. And a guy like Brzee, he seems like a stand-up guy in the Clemson community, and I think he can bring a good culture to the Saints locker room.
All righty, pick number 30, back with the Philadelphia Eagles. I will say before I tell my pick, I'm so glad I did not draft an offensive lineman. I probably one of my least favorite things about doing this is when I draft offensive linemen, I'm like, oh, they block. Woo, they're big. They can move kind of good side to side. But here I have Antonio Johnson going to Philly, the safety out of A&M. He's 6'3", 195. In college, he made 164 tackles, 97 solo. Was responsible for 2 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 pick. He's a pretty physical safety. His eyes are always downfield. And so I think having this is where the Eagles did lose some people. They lost CJ Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps, who were responsible for 99% of defensive snaps last season. So these are 2 guys that he can come straight away and start. I think being able to pull a starter at pick number 30 for the runners up from last year in the NFL, I think that's great. To be able to find someone this deep into the first round to start straight out of the gate.
Yeah, when you're drafting safeties nowadays, the guy to look at is Isaiah Simmons at the Cardinals. You got a guy that's a big dude that really can just play wherever. You can bring him down at linebacker. You can play him in coverage. You can put him on at corner. You want a guy that's physical, and you want a guy that's going to be very versatile. So I think Johnson's a great pick there for the Eagles.
Yeah, he's a very hybrid guy, like you said. I like that pick a lot right there.
Yeah, I think it helps them out a lot to kind of fill that last hole they may have in the defense.
All right, rounding us out here at the end, the Chiefs are on the board. So going with another unfortunate pick here, I'm going with Cedric Tillman from Tennessee. I think Tillman's kind of like Njigba a little bit, like where he was hurt like really all season, but he had like that really good like year prior. And I think really I had a hard time with this pick, but I just, especially with all the wide receivers getting taken. But if it goes like this, I could really see him like just kind of either trading back or getting somebody like Cedric Tillman. Just has some good potential there. He had some pretty good games last year, hadn't played that much this year, but they need somebody to kind of fill the void of Juju leaving to the Patriots. So I think he would be a good kind of makeup guy in that spot.
Yeah. We did it, guys.
Yeah.
We did it.
All we have left is let's pick our Super Bowl. Who we think's gonna make it?
Because we do this once a year, we have to go ahead and pick our Super Bowl.
Yeah, might as well, right? All right. Trevor, who you got?
Oh man, you picked the guy that wasn't even prepared. Oh goodness. I do like the Dolphins. I like the Dolphins. Bills good. I'm kind of looking through those picks. I'm kind of spoiling a little bit. But honestly, if Tua can stay healthy and they can give him an offensive line, I mean they're dangerous. Tyreek Hill right there. I just don't necessarily think they're gonna kind of fix that lineup for him. But I could see the Bills, especially if they got a guy like Gibbs, maybe give them another spark on the offense, kind of making a push. But I mean, also Chiefs. I mean, they've shown they're consistent. I mean, like they're gonna be in the conversation. So I mean, if I'm gonna just like make a pick, I hadn't really thought about it too much. I'll probably just stick with a safe choice and go with the Chiefs. They're definitely not going to, but they're a safe pick. And if they can kind of patch together some of those losses at wide receiver, they're going to be right there with Kelsey and everything.
Josh, you can't see us, but Josh was holding up his Mac Jones jersey.
That's definitely not going to happen.
It's going to be moot when Mac Jones gets traded in the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope he leaves. I hope he gets out of.
Hey, it'll be
I hope
nice
he
if he
gets
goes
out
to
of-
a contender.
I really hope he gets out of New England. Okay, I'll go. I like the Dolphins a lot. If Tua can stay healthy, I think the Dolphins have a really good shot of going deep in the playoffs. But I'm going to go with a safe pick, and I'm going to say that the Eagles get revenge and win the Super Bowl. especially if they fill a couple of holes with this draft. I mean, they're sitting very pretty with their draft picks. Um, I just think they're the most complete team in the league, and I think they're going to play annoyed that the refs cost them a Super Bowl. So
Trey, who do you have for your Super Bowl picks?
I'm going to go with the easy pick for the NFC. I'm going to go Eagles. I don't think the 49ers can rekindle that magic they had last year with Purdy. But like I said earlier, the Lions are my sneaky pick. And then the AFC, I'm going to go Josh Allen and the Bills. I do think the Eagles will finally win the big one when Jalen Hurts will be holding up the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year. But Josh Allen will give them a fight.
You think they can get past the Chiefs?
Maybe, probably not.
Even though Patrick Mahomes is Josh Allen's kryptonite.
It's fair. Jeffrey, who do you have for your Super Bowl pick?
Sweet. So I would like to say that I had mine written down. I think everyone just looked at mine and said, wow, these are really good picks. Because I have the Bills and the Eagles.
Wow.
But I do think that if Josh Allen and the Bills can pull a good run, especially towards the back end of the season, because they're always really consistent up until it comes time for them to like beat the Chiefs. That's really all they have to do is beat the Chiefs, and then they're solid. If they can do it this year, I think we might see the Chiefs fall off a little bit. Trevor, I know they have been pretty consistent, but it's been a while since it's been like since I guess Brady was in the Patriots where we saw a team just be consistent like year in, year out for like 3-4 years. I think they might regress slightly, still make it pretty like into the playoffs. But I think they might not. Yeah, I see the Bills losing to the Eagles. I think Jalen Hurts being the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, rightfully so. I think that he, and especially if they strengthen their defense up, and you see that wide receiver core, especially if they get Bijan, they'll just run the league and win pretty easily in the Super Bowl. Well, guys, it's been great. It's been fun. You're like family to us now.
4 years now, guys.
Yeah.
4 years running.
If you have made it into this. Thank you guys for listening. We hope you're back next year. We'll do this again next year. Probably nothing else, to be quite honest. Every year we think we're going to do something, and it ends up not happening. So
who knows? We may surprise you. May come out with a video.
NBA mock draft.
Yeah.
There we go.
Or a reaction to the draft.
Yeah.
Might be a little
Ooh.
shorter. Little like
That's a good one.
yeah. Until then, farewell. Stay safe. God bless.